negotiating units. And so I believe that they deserve notice in this policy. I think it's appropriate.
So just, this is Amy, Don, just point of clarification. So the words administrators or staff, you don't think covers it?
No, I don't. Like I said, there's a different title for superintendents from administrators, but there's different pay scales, contracts, and negotiating units all for those. So I think that they've differentiated themselves, that they ought to be listed in it. It's consistent.
Any other discussion on that?
I think that with this, I was very uncomfortable when we read this policy in the first place. So I feel that the more clear we are specifying people and what it is, just because you're asked those specific questions on different things also, that I just, I think the more clear we are, the better it is for all of us.
Right, and I think the addition of the meals is actually a very helpful clarification. I'm just gonna, the only thing I'm thinking about is when we talk about adding the word superintendents and no other policy or procedure, do we make that distinction? This would be a difference from everything else, and so does it mean I think we just want to think that through a little bit. I think it's been pretty established in the district that administrators covers, and staff is even a larger piece of the pie, I think.
Actually, that would be inaccurate. We use the word superintendent numerous times in our policy, separate from administrators.
And we have board members, so we specify ourselves,
Well, we are neither administrators nor staff, so
but I mean, we are
all that. Any other thoughts on this?
Feels redundant, but I think we do, though, to Amy's point, now we need to be very careful as we're looking at policies in the future. Do we need to then delineate the word administrators? I know I donated my mind, so I think it's just going to, now we're going to have to keep that thought in our mind as we continue to go through policies are we going to need to delineate individually here?
What other policies do we have it delineated in? Dawn, you were saying that.
Can you give us an example, Dawn, of a policy that does differentiate?
I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I might have one in mind.
I've just always seen it used as the umbrella, administrators as the umbrella is all.
Dawn, did you hear that question?
I heard Amy say something about umbrella.
No, the question is, what policy are you referring to that differentiates between staff?
We frequently have, we give over powers to the superintendent in our policy, where it will list the superintendent.
We often say the superintendent / designee shall whatever.
Right.
That's a portion of it, but when we're speaking of staff in general or administrators, is there any policy that you can think of that differentiates and that calls out superintendent separately?
Well, I just said it.
Other than those that
We're talking only
are directing the superintendent or are conferring.
Any example I give you doesn't count unless I come up with a different one. I just gave you a set of examples. There are numerous ones that specifically said superintendent.
Are you thinking of a policy number, Dawn? I'm just trying to see the example that you are suggesting.
Do we maybe want to, can we put this one aside till the next board meeting and look through if it's important? I mean, is it necessary to, since Dawn's, I mean, is that?
We can if that's the direction the board would like to go. I am personally uncomfortable calling out superintendent on one policy when we don't in general in the same sense on other policies. I think then we run the risk of really not saying what we want to say in the other policies by including the superintendent when we say administrators or staff. To me, that means everyone that works for the organization is covered by administrators or staff. And I wouldn't want to say on one policy, we're talking about superintendent, and then on the rest of the policies, we're not. I think that leaves a pretty big gap.
So does it warrant some more investigation, like Kimberly was saying, or do we vote on the motion now?
I just don't know, I don't know the policies well enough to get
I don't know of any policy, and I've read them fairly recently. I can't think of any policy that differentiates the superintendent from administrators or staff, unless we're talking about assigning duties or responsibilities to the superintendent. In that case, we do call them out separately because we're conferring on him or his designee the responsibility for something. Those are the only ones I'm aware of, Dawn, that would differentiate. And if there are others that you can think of, I'd be happy to look it up.
Well, obviously, I'm trying to research policies as I've been here.
I would suggest in the interest of time and sort of awkwardness over how this is playing out here, that perhaps we do move this so that we have time to research to see what other policies, and if we have this elsewhere, this specific situation of separating out superintendent from administrators, and then go forward from there.
So since this is an action item, that would, I would be looking for a motion to delay it until the next meeting.
All right, I move that we delay board policy number 7324 into our next meeting in May.
Second.
All right, all those in favor of moving this board policy 5010? Nope, sorry, not 5010. 70, I'm exploring the other ones. 7324 to the May 12th meeting, I believe it is. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Dawn, did you want to weigh in on that?
No,
Yours is a no?
that's right.
Okay. So that is 4 in favor of moving it to the next meeting, and 1 opposed. So that will be on the May 12th meeting agenda. So we are back to the rest of those policies. We'll pull that policy out. So 7210, 7220, 7320, 7321, and 7333. There's been a motion to approve.
I have some questions on 7321.
Go ahead.
So it appears by the date, the policy was revised in 2012, and if I recall correctly, that was to increase the amount to $75,000 and $300,000. First off, I want to be sure I'm accurate with the way I'm remembering, but does anyone remember what the amounts were before that increase?
We do. Let me bring Candy up here, please.
Hi, Dawn. The original amount was for bids, $15,000 for meeting quotes, up to $50,000, where we needed to have formal bids. And then it was changed from $40,000 to meet quotes, up to $75,000 for bids. And on the capital side, I believe it's $100,000. Yes, $100,000 before we needed to do formal bids, and that's been raised to 300,000. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that goods and services have increased over the years and what it costs, and the amount of time and resources it takes to bid, recognizing that most of those projects were exceeding that substantially.
These are legally prescribed bid requirement amounts?
Absolutely. In fact, that first paragraph, I believe, is directly from the RCW.
Okay, thank you very much, Candy. In the third paragraph, I see the board reserves the right to purchase through an interlocal cooperative agreement.
Yes.
At a previous meeting, it was established this is the way we purchase carpeting for the new high school. When the interlocal is procuring bids, first off, do they procure bids in their process? But are there rankings of 1, 2, and 3 for the approved company, or does the process look different?
Okay, an interlocal agreement, Dawn, is the partnership agreement which allows multiple public entities to come together and either bid together or to allow a public entity to purchase from a bid that was awarded through a different public agency. So for example, Highline School District can have a bid, and with specific language the RCW allows, we can then access that bid without going out and bidding ourselves. So it saves tremendous time and money. As far as ranking, it depends on the type of bid. So for example, there might be a bid on the state contract, for example, copiers. There could be 7 different companies, but they're not ranked by this one first or from this one second. They are all available for access based on your specific specifications of the products you want to buy. Does that help?
It does help, so that it seems a little different, and our policy language says the interlocal will comply with school district bidding requirements. I know we're required to take the lowest bid.
Yes, and so depending on the type of bid, you can have 2 types of bids. One is for pricing of a simple good. The other bid could encourage, could include service arrangements, maintenance agreements, how something is going to be installed. So you're not going to have just necessarily the lowest price for the entire component of the project, but you're going to also give it an evaluation based on service, recommendations, location, all kinds of different factors. So price in those cases is only one evaluator.
So when we go to the interlocal, looking for something, some good, do we specify a bid to match a bidder?
I'm not sure what you're asking. What I usually do is somebody tells me I need to buy such and such an item. My first choice is to go out, well, buses are a good example. My first choice is to go find a bus that meets our specs that's already being bid. Not the vendor, but the bus that I need that meets our district specs. Then if I can find an agreement or a bid that I already have an interlocal cooperative agreement with, then that means I can buy that bus without having to bid for it myself. So it's not by vendor, it's by product or service.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I guess what I asked was, do we actually create the product needs for what the vendor is selling?
Not to my knowledge, not to my experience.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, that was my questions on that.
Any further discussion on the balance of these policies?
I just have a clarification on 7220. What does it mean, provision for testing to identify target students? Is that like EAP students or, I mean, highly capable or special education? Just wasn't sure.
Title I federal grant, learning assistance program, state grant, highly capable state grant are the three that come to mind.
Okay. I just want to clarify. I figured that's what it meant.
Any further discussion on these? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right, that does pass unanimously, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the district budget status report for February 2015. Do board members have any questions or?
So I did have a question that I forwarded earlier, and I'm awfully late, so unfortunately the answer isn't, but just so the other board members know, I had asked on the capital projects fund, under expenditures, the equipment is 2 million and change over budget, so once Lydia let me know, I'm sorry.
Do you want to give
Person's
the,
name,
yeah.
someone's out ill today.
I requested additional time. Shelley Henderson, our capital projects accountant, is out ill today. So I wouldn't know where to locate her files on what the budget is comprised of and be able to compare it to actual expenditures today. So my goal is when she is well and back at the district that we will assemble the team and review the budget and compare it to actual and explain the variance.
Okay.
We can forward that.
Put that in a briefing or forward it when we have the information. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
So the capital projects budget person is ill.
She's ill today.
Okay. So any questions about the capital project fund can't be answered.
Not necessarily, that particular question can't be answered because I don't have all the details of the equipment budget.
This is an information item, so there's no approval that's being asked of us tonight.
My question for the capital project part, and I don't know if Amy asked the same question. It was very difficult to hear her. What is the 60 million in capital project fund about in the line item restricted from bond proceeds? And what is restricted from levy proceeds? And why is it in the negative? That was my question for that. If you know the answer to that, great. If not, I can wait for it.
Okay, so last June, we sold $80 million of bonds. And after incurring expenditures since that date, that is the balance of the bond proceeds that have not been expended at February 15. The levy proceeds, the difficulty with the levy is the authorization starts January 1st. Taxpayers are assessed, and yet the majority of the collections don't come in until April and May. We did not want to delay the Chromebooks and other technology purchases until the actual collections. So we are allowed during the month to essentially borrow from the assigned to fund purposes. And then when our levy collection comes in April and May, then that negative will be restored.
Okay, that makes sense, but on the 60 million in the capital project fund, in the restricted from bond proceeds, we got 80 million, we spent 20, and what happens to the rest of that? Why did we collect so much then?
Well,
we have earmarked, is it being spent in the next few months?
No, it's not like a levy. When you sell the bonds, you receive the proceeds all on the same day, as opposed to a levy, which is tax collections as they're received. And then the predominant use of the bond proceeds is for North Creek High School and Woodinville Phase 3. North Creek High School is, robust activities right now. Woodinville Phase 3 will begin in earnest when the kids have completed the school year, so there'll be more expenditures in the summer, as well as the other bond projects that we do in the summer that we will not start until the kids are done with school. Also, we sell bonds usually 2 times in a 4-year cycle, and that has to complete the 4 years of projects for those bonds. And then, so we always intended to sell about half in 2014 and the remaining half in 2015 due to market rates and to make sure that we have ample cash flow when those expenditures start coming in quicker. Does that?
Why would we sell them twice?
Because there is a cost to selling bonds that's fairly high and a lot of effort surrounding the sale of those bonds.
So we had some questions come in, and one of my concerns was about the ASB budget. And since I've been on this board, the ASB has not spent all their money every year. And I heard Mr. Smith from Kenmore Elementary was not able to buy candy because they had used up the year's actual budget on things prioritized from a previous year. As I understand it, ASB funds should be used. I think it's pretty strongly worded that they should be used to benefit students that raise those funds. And I remember Dick Huntsbuzzy speaking more than once to me about this issue. If we are only at 27% in terms of spending, do we have some remedy for this? ASB mentors and advisors, are they paid out of the ASB funds? I know that they receive a stipend, correct?
I'm going to look to Jeff because I can't remember all the stipends for those positions. Sorry.
Dawn, I want to make sure I understand your question. Could you ask it again?
The ASB mentors and advisors, are they paid from the ASB funds, their stipend?
I think, well, there's an ASB advisor at the high school that's basic ed, yeah, I believe, I don't think that, general fund, yeah. It doesn't come out of ASB funds. The ASBs can elect to spend money on staff costs, and sometimes they do. Those expenses, those requests are submitted to the students and they vote on it, and they sometimes supplement, for instance, they sometimes pay for extra coaches, sometimes they pay for extra activities.
All of the advisors that are on the stipend schedule that would be, say, in the NSEA agreement, though, those are all general fund.
Those are all general fund, correct, yeah. There are no bargain stipends that come out of ASB. I don't think that would be.
Okay. So I guess, you know, I'm looking at funds that roll over year after year after year after year, and I'm wondering, well, it looks like some of the money that we collected, and my kids are out of school, is still probably in the coffers there at their various schools. So who handles making sure that ASBs are spending the money on the kids that have worked to collect the money? Do we have a district level person who's over at ASB?
No, we are the fiduciary agent for the funds, basically, but it's up to the students and the advisors to vote on how funds are expended. Their restriction is they can't exceed their budget, so they usually have budgets to ensure that they won't exceed that, because they, unlike the other funds, each individual school can't come back to us and ask for more budget authority. Also, you're looking at 30 ASBs, so some schools spend every dime and some schools don't spend every dime in anticipation of other events, and so I can't speak for each school, but it's an accumulation of 30 schools, not just one large budget.
And Dawn, I'm looking at policy number 3510 that addresses associated student bodies. And the last paragraph in that says that each ASB shall prepare and submit annually a budget for the support of the ASB program to the board for approval. All property and money acquired by ASBs shall be district funds and shall be deposited and dispersed from the district's associated student body program fund. Yeah, it's a
There's
little-
no requirement that they spend it down though, so they can just keep it, they can keep it going from
There's a
year to year.
If you look at the rest of the policy, it's, there's a staff member that's assigned, short of reading the entire policy.
No,
You can
I'm
find it
asking for
3510.
someone.
But the principal shall designate a staff member as the primary advisor to the ASB and assure that all groups affiliated with the ASB have an advisor assigned to them. So each building has,
And it's just from seeing various activities over the years that it's been my experience that a lot of expense hits the last 2 months,
Following
May
year.
and June.
Yeah.
May and June's when a lot of the money is spent.
Like
It's
yearbook.
If
Well,
you
well,
look at,
prom,
Graduation activities.
graduation breakfasts, things like that. A lot of the
Yeah.
expense, at least at the high school, coming to mind right away, is spent in May and June.
if you think about DECA and FBLA that are at international competitions, if you think about the Inglemoor High School Orchestra that was just on the East Coast. So there are a lot of expenses that are kind of backloaded. I think it's a valid point though that I think Dawn brings up, and it's one that conversation I've had different times throughout my career, which is that whole idea that you're raising money that then doesn't get spent on the students who raise it. And sometimes there's valid reasons for that. If there is a big trip that's coming up, it might be that monies are being raised over multiple years before they're expended. But there's also a sense that people have that you want to end the year with more money than you started with, regardless of really, that's really not necessarily the intent of ASB. So I think it's an issue for us to continue to watch to make sure that ASBs don't accumulate large amounts of money that they don't have future plans for. But it's not uncommon. When I oversaw ASB as a principal or as an assistant principal, I had a principal who I had a healthy debate with every year as we constructed the ASB budget, because she always wanted to see the balance at the end of the year being greater than the balance at the beginning of the year. And that always ran counter to my sense of what ASB budget should be about. But there's just different philosophies that people bring to it. But ultimately, it's the students who approve the expenditures for ASB.
Yes, and one of the other main drivers of revenue is ASB card sales. So it's not a true fundraiser where the students are working towards something. It's dependent on the kids who purchase those cards and the plans to expend that money. So you could have more students purchasing those cards, fewer students, and you're building in that buffer in case you have fewer students who elect to participate in ASB.
And I've been smiling at Candy through all this because she's had many board members in her office when we see the ASB fund saying, well, why can't we do something? And that is one of our most carefully looked at expenditures in our audits, is how our ASB money is spent, and it is very tight. And I've got numbers of people going, yes, I've been through that, you are very limited on how that money can be spent.
Can they make donations to a local PTA if they have a certain?
No. We've tried. If you have really, I really highly recommend ASB 101 from Candy, because it is fantastic. It really helps you understand how challenging it is to try to spend money. I can't got so many people out there nodding yes, I've tried to do this. It's very restrictive.
So I guess my suggestion would be then that if schools are consistently coming in under budget, that perhaps they could bring down the cost of their ASB cards. I know I've heard complaints about the cost of ASB cards through the years.
Of course, we have the ASB card fee is the same for all junior highs and the same for all high schools. So then that could raise some equity issues.
Okay, is there any other discussion on this item?
Well, I think somebody should maybe of it. How many ASBs did you say?
30.
30. Maybe we need someone focusing on it to clean it up, if it's always going to be over because, or under, or whatever. This happens every year, and I've watched it for years, so I just would like a plan for fixing it, if we can.
It is primarily super.
It's one of those challenging areas. It's student directed, so that's a tough one. I agree. I mean, it would be nice to see them utilize the money and for the benefit of the students. It's hard to know how to direct that when they're in charge of their budgets.
I just wanted to know, Ken had brought up on one of his points on this question was about maximizing net revenue from the use of facilities, and that's a board policy that we have. Do we already do that, or, I mean, do we rent out our?
We have a facility use schedule for our buildings, and it's a graduated schedule, so generally if it's local youth activities, those would be the lowest paid. And then as you move up to perhaps for-profit activities, people wanting to rent our facilities, those would be the higher paid.
Do we rent them out a lot? I know we do for youth
we have-
sports and all
We
that.
do a tremendous amount
Do
of
we?
facility rental, mostly for youth activities and sports.
I'm going to make an appointment with you because when I first came on the board, it's so big, the budget, and now that I've been here a year and a half, I feel like it would be that time again. So,
Schedule some time with Candy too. She's
yeah,
a
that'd be good.
Thank you.
wealth of information. Thank you both. All right, hearing no further discussion on that item, we'll move on to,
I had one more question for Lydia.
oh, she's on her way back. Getting exercise.
In the district budget status report, I did see it where, I think was it this morning? I think so. They came in, and Mr. Smith asked a question about budget capacity. And so I looked, and I'm not sure where that is. Where is budget capacity? How much budget capacity exists in the category of this budget, and where is that in this report? I don't see anything that says capacity. Where would that be?
You wouldn't see capacity. The state prescribed format for the budget status doesn't ask that be singled out. So our budget capacity, I'd be happy to share the details with you. The best place would be last August memo when we recommended that we would be raising the capacity from 4 million to 5 million in the 14-15 school year. And I would be happy to forward that memo back to you. But it's not, many things are not detailed out in the state prescribed format.
And Lydia, that capacity is built into the budget as both a revenue and an expenditure. So
Correct, it's on both sides of the equation.
Right. From the standpoint of the budget, it doesn't increase or decrease the bottom line on the budget.
Absolutely correct.
Right, but we planned for capacity, and I just couldn't find it on the revenue or the expenditure side. So I was wondering, is it just a little bit of capacity in everything?
Can you define what you mean by capacity? I want to just be sure that we understand what you're
Capacity
asking.
would be if you have something unexpected and cost, your budget costs go over. That's what capacity means.
There's several types of capacity. One capacity is at the end of the year, schools and certain collective bargaining agreements allow for carryovers. If you don't have that capacity, you can't allow them to carry over the funds because you don't duplicate the expenditure. So that is a placeholder for the schools and the collective bargaining agreements to carry over funds. Another place that there's capacity is for new grants or donations. So if a PTA raises $90,000 for a new playground and they donate the money in November, we had no idea when the budget adopted that that $90,000 was coming, but we want to be able to spend it. So the 90 is in the revenue and the 90 is in the budget capacity, so now we can build that playground that we didn't know about when the budget was adopted. The third type of capacity is for enrollment growth. So every year when you see the 0.5%, so the budget enrollment that you see, we take out 0.5%. There is a corresponding budget capacity for that 0.5% if those students come in, so that we can hire the staff that correlate to those students. The revenue is the new state money that wasn't budgeted, that will be driven off the new students.
Are those the only three kinds of capacity we do?
Those are the three dominant capacities. There's like $1,032 for if I miscount teachers or misestimate teachers that will be hired on October 1st. There are smaller pockets.
So would another example, Lydia, be that once or twice a year I have a patron in the district who generally sends me a check and asks me to do something good with it.
That's it.
So I generally direct that money down to support our McKinney-Vento homeless students.
Exactly.
That's not a revenue source we anticipated when we built the budget, nor did we know that we'd have the ability to expend that money.
Right.
So the capacity allows us to both receive and then spend those dollars.
Right.
That's a very small
That's
example.
not in this report then at all.
It is, it's just not identified as such because that's not the state required format.
I see. Okay, well, thank you very much. I think that explains it. I looked really hard trying to find the capacity somewhere, and it's been a lot of trouble.
Okay, thank you.
All right, hearing no further discussion on this item, we'll move on to the first reading of board policies 9110, capital facilities plan, 9300, operation and maintenance of district facilities, 9323, use of school facilities, and 9330, building maintenance, all being reaffirmations. So this is first reading, so this will be back on the agenda on the 12th for approval. Any questions or discussion on any of these policies? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is future agenda items. And I'll just, before I open it up for requests, I'll just refer you to the memo that I put in the briefing that gives you a kind of an overview of where the requests that have already been made, where they are. The first one was that diversity, racial equity, and the status of that one is that it will be scheduled for May 12th. I heard Sandy and Larry attended the diversity conference at the UW Bothell, so we'll be looking forward to hearing information from that.
Is that a part of the conversations with the board, April?
No,
Or is
that will
that's a
be
discussion
an agenda item
Okay.
for coming up with a policy similar to, kind of triggered by the Tukwila policy that Dawn shared with us. And then the April 29th, was anyone able to get scheduled for that? I still haven't heard whether they are able to accommodate me on the wait list for the April 29th at the Renton Technical College, Achieving Educational Racial Equality Through Policy. So, I hope to get in, we'll see. But
Is that for board members?
it is specifically for board members. They closed it to anyone else. And they're already at capacity, yeah. So
Hopefully they'll run it again.
I think that there's evidence that there's strong interest in it, for sure, so. Yeah. So, so I'll let you know whether I get in on that. If I do, I will bring the information from that We'll be looking for Sandy to bring information as well, and we'll be looking at the Tukwila policy. And I'm going to renew my request that when we first got this from Dawn, that you take a look at that policy and see what elements of it you feel would be important to include in a policy for
So
ourselves.
we're looking at the Tukwila policy
We're looking
that
at
Dawn had given us,
exactly.
and now we're looking to adopt it.
No, we're looking at what elements of that policy
Okay.
are you would like to see in a policy for North Shore.
And if
And if it is the whole
our
policy,
district-
then
Okay.
that's one piece of information. But
So did I miss the date when we were all going to have some kind of ethics equity training or something? I heard that there were some things available, but not all board members can attend them.
I don't know of any other dates. Larry, is there anything else that's, I think, is there diversity training that's going on in the district right now that board members might have access to?
No, I think there were 2 events that were being promoted by the Puget Sound ESD. This was, the one you're referring to is one of them. I would need to do a little digging to find the other one. And then the 3rd event was the UWB conference last Saturday that Sandy and I attended.
The one that was,
Were you able to contact any of the names I gave you?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I have, and I have a placeholder from the folks from Cultures Connecting for the first day of our August retreat. I haven't had a chance to do much detailed planning other than I've had an initial conversation about what we're looking for and what our needs are, and we've got the presenters held for the day, and I'll be connecting with them in the coming weeks to start getting some more specifics around that date.
one option
So
would
the
be,
names that I gave you, you're using for the August advance?
Yes, one of the names that you had provided me, yes.
Yeah, I provided those names in hopes that we were going to use someone for the board to have some kind of a training before we moved on to just adopting policy, so that we were all on the same page.
That was my understanding, that we were going to have some training with some of the superintendents or top administrators.
Well, you participated in the advance, and so you'll certainly get there. If the board, if you want a separate training of your own, we can certainly discuss that and get that arranged. We would just need to know when you would like to have that scheduled and what specifically your needs would be.
I think the benefit to it is, while I wish I could have gone to the UW, but you all know I had something important on that day. But yeah, I think diversity training can be different at different places, and different aspects of diversity training can be emphasized. So I think that all of us having, I guess there's maybe 2 ways to look at it. Maybe having different diversity training and bringing back what we all learned, or us having one person that's giving us the same message and then building upon that.
I would certainly wholeheartedly support any efforts, collective efforts you want to proceed with any training. I think any trainer that you would work with, their first question would be, what do you see as your needs and what are you hoping to achieve through the training? And so I don't know that you've had an opportunity to have a conversation at that level yet to define that I could articulate on your behalf to somebody, but I'm more than happy to do that once you've had that level of conversation.
so how about if we participate in the advance and get that initial training, and then from that we determine what it is that we are looking for?
Look, or it could be that your conversation on May 12th might flesh some of that out as well.
And it sounds like May 12th is premature, based on the conversation that I'm hearing on the dais, that maybe this particular policy we would want to look at it after we do the training.
I don't know that we need to make it that complicated. I think just basic diversity training to start with, that people that work with school districts. So how do we engage our Hispanic population, our ELL, the different, I mean, some of the things I think that we grapple with when we're, even it could be free reduced lunch, that we're grappling with in these meetings. I feel like putting it off longer, we're trying to equip all of us. So at a basic level, I don't know, Dawn, if there are people that have worked with school districts before, but there's some I think there's some basic things we can get, and then we can be more specific, but instead of delaying.
We can certainly put it on the agenda to have a discussion about it on the 12th. Why don't we do that? I hope that I will have by that time been able to attend this. And I'll ask WASDA if they're planning, or PSESD, I guess it is, Puget Sound Educational Service District, whether they're planning another one to accommodate the apparent desire for this. But my particular interest in this one is because it was policy, achieving educational equity, racial equality through policy. So it really speaks to board directors and the work that we do. So,
and I think we can still have that on. I also know somebody that an African American lady that goes around to all businesses like Microsoft. I mean that. So there's people that do this for corporations and. But so, I don't know that we have to take that policy off, or do you feel more comfortable with that?
So let's put it on as a discussion item.
Okay.
It sounds like it might be premature as a policy, but why don't we task board members with coming to the meeting prepared to talk about what you would like to gain from diversity training. And then we can get...
That makes sense.
Okay. All right, so that will be a discussion item on the May 12th agenda. And then the second item in the memo was the Smarter Balance testing. Information was provided in the board briefing, and if there's additional information that is requested or necessary, then you can let us know. But I think that was satisfied, but you can tell me if it was not. Is that?
Oh, I think the information sessions have been jointly put on by the PTA have been enormously helpful in understanding what's going on.
I agree.
We will continue to provide at least one more update on the refusals because they're quite significant.
Is there somebody we should be talking to about the practice of making assigning a 0 to the students who don't participate? State board?
This Department of Education.
Department of Education. Oh. Okay. I will. And then the next one was the conversations with the board for the Latino community. Leanna is working to secure a date for that, and she'll get back to us to get our input on when, but we're hoping to do that in May sometime. And it's part of a larger conversation, I think was communicated to you from Leanna, about not just the Latino population, but the top 5 groups, non-Caucasian groups.
Since May is 2 days away and my calendar's already quite crazy, can I be protecting some days that are potential?
Yeah, I don't know that she's gotten that far in the conversation. She's been talking to the natural leaders and working on getting dates, but I will make that request for sure.
That'd be very helpful.
Agreed.
Yeah,
But I'm very excited about it and thankful that she's working on this.
yeah, and they are too, so that'll be really nice. And then the fourth...
My batteries are about to die. I'm not going to be on when the voting is done, but I'm about to lose battery, and so I want to tell you no. I do have a question. I've been contacted by a number of people about an administrative procedure, 4210P. Do you know who is writing that? I'd like to contact whoever's writing that.
Is that school support organizations, Dawn?
Administrative procedure 4210P, community relations, school support organizations, yeah.
Correct. Is that refer to the ability of staff members to serve as officers in those organizations?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're working on that now. Leanna is the chief person on that, but we're having a larger conversation about whether or not, the question I've been asked specifically is whether or not substitutes qualify as staff members that would fall under that prohibition to serve as officers of these organizations or people who could handle funds. And so we're debating that around internally. So Leanna would be the main contact on that, but you could certainly forward any questions or folks who have concerns to me. I'd be happy to interact.
Yeah, I'll contact Leanna then. Thank you.
Okay.
Dawn, you saw the memo in the briefing, so I'll just check in with you right now to see if there's anything else you wanted to share for your board report or future agenda items before your battery dies.
I sent it to Cindy. It'll be fine.
You sent it to
Cindy.
Cindy. Okay, great. Okay,
Okay.
thank you, Dawn. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Bye. All right, so continuing on the list, the climate conversation is scheduled to be part of the board superintendent evaluations. The data that we're identifying, that we're looking at school visits, kind of figuring out what is important to us and what we would like to see, especially in consideration of the fact that we don't have a consistent test every year. So I know staff is working on that too, but that's not currently scheduled. Visiting other districts' board meetings, I meant to call you, Kimberly, because it wasn't clear to me whether we were going to do that as individuals or whether that was going to be a group organizing.
I think it'd be great if I mean, I know all of our time's tight maybe, but if at least two of us went and, you know, reported back or.
So can we arrange that individually? And is there anything that you require of me for that?
No, but I mean, do we, well, I guess, do you want to take the lead on that? Do you want me to take the lead on that? Because we need to contact, we want to let them know that we're coming to their board meetings.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
I'm happy to let you do it if you want to, or if you would like me to do it, I can
The first
do
one
it
comes
as
to
well.
mind is to go to Seattle.
Say that again. Seattle. Some of them are on our same night, so it's hard to get to. Yeah. So Kimberly, do you want me to do that, or would you like to
It's
gather dates?
Either way. It's up to you. I think Seattle I would be interested in going to Seattle, but I'd also be interested in seeing ones that are similar to us also. But I think they have a lot of diversity, a lot of different issues going on.
Maybe you could let us know what Seattle's over local, when their meeting dates are.
Okay, good
And then we
idea.
can go from there.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Okay, so
Perfect.
you're going to find
Get
out when the
local
meeting dates are
dates, yes.
for districts that you particularly wanted to.
And I don't know, does anyone else have an interest in any?
Yeah, I think so. It's
Yeah, if you
interesting.
like Washington,
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious
Yeah.
about, yeah.
I've been to a few,
Bellevue, maybe.
but it's always interesting to hear the current issues as well.
Yeah.
And then the last one was, sorry, go ahead.
But we'll probably learn more.
And then the last one was revisions to board policies 5271, reporting improper governmental action, and 4312, community relations, complaints concerning staff or programs. We have sample language that we'll be putting on the agenda for the next time to add to that policy. So we'll be looking at that on the 12th. Any other questions on those or concerns or any I missed that?
I thought you did a good job.
I should be doing this more often, giving you a status on that.
Actually, I like that.
Yeah,
If we had like,
The summary
yeah,
was helpful.
it was
Absolutely.
really good to,
Yeah.
and that's perfect, because then it doesn't cause any miscommunication. We
Right.
might say this was missed
Right.
or whatever.
I'll make it regular.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that suggestion. Any other future agenda items?
I have
Okay.
two. One is the inequitability in our district for science teachers in the elementary schools. And so what we can do about that, what's on the docket, I know with the new Smarter Balance in Science in the elementaries, what is that looking like? When will that be changing? Because I do think that the elementary schools that don't have that, the poor when we're talking about our teachers being overworked in certain areas, I mean, many of the I don't know if overwork's the right word, but not having enough resources at times. This is one of those areas where, trying to grab all, they're trying to get people that are specialists in the area, when if we just had one person there, it would really save a lot of time that the teacher has to take to try and find all these different people and resources, and time that I think takes away from our kids. That isn't necessarily that the teacher's spending doing.
So I just want to understand what you're asking. Are you asking for this to be part of the budget discussion on something, on providing science teachers for elementary schools?
Yes, do we have a plan to provide science teachers throughout all of our elementary schools, K through 5? We have some elementary schools that are providing them, so that's not a question, that's a statement. And now some PTAs that can't afford them or choose to prioritize it, in my opinion, creates inequitability in other schools. And that is ultimately hurts our kids and disadvantages some of our children, and science is very important. So having a discussion or knowing, are we going to be adding that as the smarter balance and the requirements for science change at the elementary level? Because they are changing. Isn't science requirements changing?
Next generation.
Yeah, next generation, I'm sorry, I said smarter balance.
So did you want it as an agenda item on the meeting, or do you want it as part of the discussion for budget?
Maybe a board, I don't know if there's a plan, so first that's a question, and a discussion item would be great.
Right, so, okay. Or we could start it as a briefing item and see where it goes. We can summarize kind of what exists right now, and how and why those positions exist and how they're funded. And then our thoughts about where we might be able to go with that. We don't have a comprehensive plan to add science specialists at all of the elementary schools. We have talked about the fact that if we got K3 class size reduction or some enhanced staffing allocation from the legislature, whether it's I-1351 or whether it's whatever, and we don't have classroom space to create comprehensive, create self-contained classrooms of 17 kids, what other possibilities might we look at for assigning of staff if the legislation allowed that level of flexibility? And so science specialists or reading specialists or math specialists who can take on some of that subject-specific kind of work, that might be really helpful to regular classroom teachers as an alternative mode of relief. We've talked about those kinds of things, but we don't have a comprehensive plan for specifically science specialists at this point.
So we'll start with board briefing, and then if you want more information, we can add it as an agenda item.
Okay, and I'd like to see science at every school. And then my other agenda item is, there was some discussion going around about students that that don't have lunch money in an account, in their bank account, and the way that we manage that. My understanding is that the students are not given a full lunch if they don't have money in their account. If they can't afford it but they don't qualify for free reduced lunch, then the students are not given a full lunch. And so I would like to have that as a discussion item and talk about what our policies are around that. If there are any policies involving kids that don't get a meal if they need a meal.
So I've responded to that email, and you probably haven't seen the response yet.
I did not.
Yeah, I think it'll be in this week's briefing. So.
Yeah, and I actually have, there's a fairly elaborate policy of how this is responded to in our schools, and I actually got a summary of that today from Food Service Director Linda Howell, and I'd be happy to share that in the briefing, and maybe we can see where that discussion
That would be great.
Yeah.
And that's a board policy? Or
The board policy is pretty simple.
can we get that also?
It's in policies and regs on the electronic school board. You want a hard copy of it? Is that?
You just send it with the briefing so it's all together, so we have it all at the same time. But it was information going around before we got that email, so but definitely regarding that, but there was a lot of other talk surrounding that, and some PTAs, I guess, provide lunch and others don't? And again, where's the equitability issue since we're talking about diversity and all these?
One of the things I shared with the email, person who emailed, was that North Shore Nursing Networks is working